Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're taking a look at a PS1 game. Yeah, you surprised? Well anyway, so this one is actually not a Japan-only one. This is a game that was only released in Korea. Yeah, so this is a Korean game, and it happens to be Manic Game Girl. So it was developed and published by Joycast Entertainment, and was released in 2002. And there is some pretty interesting things about this game's release. For an example, the director of this game happened to do some major programming for the game Parasite Eve, which I don't need to say much about, but that game is really awesome, so the fact that someone who was involved with that game working on this game has a lot of potential. And the other interesting thing I wanted to mention is that this game did have some plans on getting a Western release back then, but was unfortunately cancelled. But as you can see in these screenshots from the magazine Gaming Age, the text is in English, so that leads me to believe that there might have been a beta for this version of the game. Although if it does exist, I would imagine it is lost media at this point. But it's still very interesting to know that someone was planning on wanting to release this game back then, and I would imagine the reason why it never got made was to do with the release date. So with all that said, what type of game is this? It happens to be an action-adventure with some 3D beat-em-up elements. But before we get into the gameplay, let's talk about the game's story. So the game stars our main character, Amber, who happens to be a university student. And she was never huge into video games, but one day she ends up wanting to take up the hobby of wanting to buy a game console. So after playing the video game for a little bit, and yes, as you can see here, the game controller for this console is fucking massive and makes the Duke controller look like an ant. So anyways, after playing for a bit, she ends up discovering this weird power where she's actually able to transform into a superhero. And apparently there is an evil gaming company that is trying to take over the world. Yes, this game's story is as crazy as it sounds, and honestly, I kinda love it. So yes, I guess the first thing I should explain that yes, this game is very much a comedy type game. So the game does happen to break the fourth wall, where it does poke fun at a lot of gaming stuff around the time. And the whole plot itself is just very over the top and goofy, and is not serious whatsoever. And yep, I'm all for it. And in case you're wondering how I'm able to read all of this, the game was translated from Korean to Spanish thanks to Mr. Nobody, who has worked on some pretty cool stuff. Now, even though I can't read Spanish itself, the one good thing I can say is that translating from Spanish to English is a lot easier compared to Japanese to English. So even though this game still does not have an English fan translation patch, I still found the game to be pretty manageable to play through. Yeah, the good old Hiko method did not let me down. So yeah, that's the gist of this game's story. Very nonsensical, but it's done in a pretty fun way that I do like. So now, let's get talking about the game's gameplay. So the navigation in this game is that you run around the whole city in different buildings and just gotta collect different items, you can talk to people, you can go to the store and buy health items and batteries and even some power-ups for your character. You can even go to an arcade and play some mini-games, such as a claw machine and a rhythm game that looks like a methed out version of SpongeBob. And yes, by the way, you can get hit by cars in this game, which is pretty amusing, and you can't die from them, but they do take away most of your health, so obviously, don't do it. So yeah, once you know where to go and what to do, you then got to go to some areas where you gotta fight some bad guys, and then over here, you then gotta transform into your superhero powers, and you just gotta beat the crap out of them. And usually these parts play out the same, where you just gotta beat up a bunch of people in the room, you talk to them after you beat them up, and sometimes they'll give you stuff like a key card. And then you go through those locked doors and possibly help out some people, and then there you go. And then there are some boss battles that are pretty weird where you gotta fight some giant bugs, and there's one specific one that I remember where these giant bugs will literally take a shit on you. It's pretty nasty, but I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty funny. So that's all I need to say about the exploration in the game. So you walk around, You have to trigger some cutscenes, you gotta fight some bad dudes, and you gotta repeat all of that up to Chapter 7. So now, when it comes to the game's combat, so to enter in combat mode, to transform, you gotta select the item Game Stealth, and that allows you to transform. But you don't want to stay in the hero mode too long, because it does take up some battery power as you're in it, kinda similar to the game Rent-A-Hero. So once you start fighting people, you have 2 attack buttons, you got a punch and a kick. And if you happen to have any upgrades, which are, by the way, video games in this game, so when you use a video game item, that allows you to use a special attack a certain amount of times, usually being some sort of projectile. And if you're up close to an enemy, you can grab them, but I will say, the grabbing in this game is very inconsistent. So maybe this will be a good time for me to talk about the game's controls, at least when it comes to the combat. And I will be honest, they're kinda not that great. Not the worst thing that I've ever played, but definitely far from good. So here's the big problem, is that the hit detection is all over the place. Like, you just kick and punch right through people sometimes. It's very weird. And even when using the special attacks, I always feel like you have to be, like, right on the mark. If you're just a centimeter off, it doesn't count. Even when you're fighting the bug enemies, and you gotta fight those enemies in different ways. Either by using bug spray on them when they get close to you, or even when laying down a bug trap and then just hitting them in the face. Even using the bug spray on them, the hit detection on that is all over the place and very inconsistent. So yeah, I just gotta put it out here that that is probably the biggest flaw with this game. Because everything else is not that bad. Like, for an example, the response timing with the button inputs doesn't feel delayed or anything like that. And also moving around, yeah, maybe it's a little sensitive, but it's not that bad. So if the hit detection was at least a little bit better, like, I'm not asking for a lot, but just a little bit better, I think it could have been at least decent. So now let's get moving on and start talking about the other things, like the graphics. And for a 3D PS1 game made in 2002, I have to say, this game looks really, really good. I don't think I put it up there as being the best looking 3D game that I've seen on PS1, but it is very close and high up there. So where can I start? Like, there's a lot of stuff I can talk about here for that. I just love so much of the backgrounds and, like, the setting and, like, the aesthetics that the game has. It just looks really great. The character models look really good, and there's actually a lot of different variety of them, and there's only a couple repeats that I've seen, so it's quite impressive on that front. There's a lot of cool little Easter eggs that you can find within the background. Like, the first cool thing that I've seen was that in your bedroom there's a picture of a dog, which looks really cute. I would imagine that probably belongs to one of the developers. And looking through the game store in this game is like holy Easter egg galore. There's just so much to look at here. Like, I'm not gonna comment over all of them, but just by looking at these box arts that they pixelized the hell out of, you can tell what they are, and it was just really cool and charming. Also, another odd thing that I noticed too is that whenever you see the anime magazine on the ground that you pick up for money, if you just look at it closely, you notice it kind of looks very similar to Cardcaptor Sakura. But yeah, with all like the little like Easter egg references that they make in this game, which are cool, I still think graphically this game looks really nice and appealing looking, even for the time it came out. It's bright and colorful, and nothing in the game looks boring. There's always something interesting to look at. Plus, I just like the architecture in the game too, so yeah, I'll just leave it as that, yes, it is one of the better looking 3D games on PS1 that you can get. And now, as for the game's music, the music in this game, I also think is pretty good. It has some really nice upbeat tracks, and some of them are pretty catchy. The only thing that is unfortunate is that I can't find any of it online anywhere, so yeah, unfortunately the music in the background is going to be whatever I'm going to put here. But I can say that the music was really nice to listen to while playing the game, and some of it was pretty memorable. And I can say that it was a very solid OST overall. There's really nothing bad I can say about it. But I should also mention that the opening theme for this game I also thought was pretty nice sounding too, although not exactly what I would expect for an opening theme for a video game, but I still liked it and thought it was interesting. And as for the voice acting, it's all in Korean, so obviously I don't really have much to say about the quality of it, but one thing I found impressive was that there is so much different characters that were voiced in this game. Even random characters that have nothing to do with the plot even have voices in them. So I thought it was impressive that they managed to put in so much voice work within the game for being a one-disc game too. So I did found that to be really cool, but as for any of the voice actors in here, I tried looking them up, and it was really hard to find any information on them, and even if I did find out some of them were being an actor, it was hard to tell if it was the same person or not, because, you know, some of these people might have, like, a common name that's in Korean. But yeah, I really just wanted to mention the fact that they managed to fit in, like, all the voice files in one disc. Alright, now, if you wanted to go out and buy yourself a copy of this game, I'm just gonna say right now that this one is not cheap at all, and there's only 4 of them that I've seen. Cheapest I've seen was 500, and the highest was 700. So yeah, I can definitely say, even at the lowest price, this game is not worth paying for, trust me. So if you really want to play this game, just emulate it at this point, because even at $500, you can buy yourself some sort of device that can emulate PS1 games. But enough about that. Now, as for my overall thoughts on this game, this is a game that got almost everything right. The game's concept is very fun and creative, and I really like it a lot. The graphics are very nice and appealing to look at, even for the time it came out, and the music is just really nice sounding. And the combat was almost there at being good, but well, like I already said, that hit detection really made a huge dent into this game. But the one weird thing I do have to mention that I didn't mention before is that even though this game's hit detection is really bad, it doesn't make the game stupidly impossible, which is weird to think, because you think it would, but no, because I feel like that the game's difficulty at first is really damn easy. Like, your character takes so much hits from these enemies, even when they gang up on you a lot. They barely do any damage. It's really until the later end of the game is where they start to get really annoying, which I'll talk about that in a sec. So even with the bad hit detection, it doesn't make the game unplayable, it just makes the game a bit more dull and not as fun to play. All because shit doesn't work the way it should, because it doesn't feel satisfying when you beat an enemy just because of a mere fluke. Also, the bosses with the bugs, like I mentioned before, I really don't like doing them. It just takes forever just to do it because of, like I said, the bad hit detection, and also they're just annoying to deal with. And then the last chapter of the game is really long because you have to go through a huge maze where you're fighting up a bunch of enemies, and this is where the game gets really hard, I feel like. Also, everywhere looks the same in this maze part, and it's just really annoying to just keep constantly looking at your map just to be able to make sure you're going the right way, because otherwise you wouldn't have no idea. So yeah, that part's just not fun, but it's at the very end of the game. And another complaint I should mention that I haven't mentioned yet is that this game has a lot of cutscenes and a lot of dialogue parts that you can't, like, fast forward through, so I know a lot of people would really hate that, and normally I'm not crazy about it either, but in this game I didn't think it was as bad as, like, Overblood 2 or anything like that, because at least the story in this game is at least kind of funny and amusing. But I do think it is important to mention that yes, this game does have some long stretches of dialogue so you can't quickly skip over. And those are really all the complaints I have with this game, so yeah, like I said, everything about this game is good, except for the one thing that I keep talking about, and honestly, this is a game that I think deserves a remake of some kind, or if not a remake, at least some sort of spiritual successor that's like very similar to it. Because I really do think the whole idea of playing as like some character who can transform into a superhero and then everything is all video gaming related and it's all over the top as shit, I think is just really awesome. And I haven't seen much newer games that have stuff like that. Like, of course there are games that do have the same type of humor of making fun of the gaming market. Like, for example, on the Dreamcast, you got Say Gaga Gaga Ga, and then there's the Natunia series, which also does poke fun at the gaming market scene, and also does have a lot of, like, breaking the fourth wall type of jokes. But I think it would be really awesome if there was a 3D beat-em-up with RPG elements and you just wander around on a town and then there's like, yeah, like a bunch of video game stuff come to life and taking over the town type of thing and you just gotta like, you know, beat the shit out of them. I don't know, I'm just making shit up as I go, but I think that just sounds like a really amazing idea. So yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about Manic Game Girl. It's a game that had so much potential at being great, but unfortunately, disappointed me with one major thing. So knowing this, it's very hard for me to recommend this game to most people, especially if you don't know Korean or Spanish, then it's even more so. But hopefully this might spark some inspiration for someone to make a game that's similar to this and to improve upon it even more so. Because if that can happen, I'll be happy with that. So that being said, thanks for watching, commenting, and have yourselves a great day.
Spiders! Spiders! Get them off me! Get them off me! Get them